All right, all right. We got some good intro music. I am not mad at that. Hello, everybody.
Questions. I guess that's what I'm gonna get. Questions.
You're going to get some questions. I got to get through this intro first, if you don't mind. All right, so I'm Brakkton Booker, a correspondent with Politico, and, this guy needs no introduction, obviously. He's a trailblazer, he's a senator, he's a pastor, he's one of the most sought-after voices in the Democratic Party. It's very hard to catch up with this man to get an interview, so we're so lucky to have him here today. So welcome in, Senator Warnock. So look, we're going to talk about a range of things, but I think I got to ask about what happened yesterday during the roll call. I think it was the roll call heard around the world. Did you know Lil Jon was going to be there? And what does this say about where Georgia is in sort of where Georgia is as far as the Democratic Party?
Look, Georgia is full of surprises, right? We shocked the world in 2021 when we flipped the Senate. And yesterday, I think it's safe to say that we won the roll call.
You won the roll call too? Okay, all right.
Lil Jon, I mean, come on.
Well, look, there was some other things that happened last night too. There was some roof-raising speeches that were given by the former First Lady, the former president. They kind of gave their take about what this moment is calling for, and they sought to kind of really reframe where we are in American politics, right? They issued this urgent plea that Democrats can't really sit on their hands this election.
Right.
But I think what really stood out was First Lady Michelle Obama, basically a stunning admission that, the we go high approach did not really work 8 years ago, and there needs to be kind of a course correction here. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what the president and former president and first lady were communicating is that we can't take anything for granted in this race, that we've got to run this all the way through the tape. I don't know, I'm feeling very much inspired by the energy that I'm feeling here in Chicago. You can't contain it, right? And I'm feeling that same energy on the ground in Georgia and across the country. But, we know how these races go. I think on the other side of Labor Day, somewhere between Labor Day and the first week of October, this race is likely to tighten. We're in a country that's about 50-50. And I think part of their message to us was that we've got to run this all the way through the tape. That means phone banking. That means knocking on doors. It means not only voting, but making sure everybody in your circle votes, because these races get decided by the margins, precinct by precinct. And because the stakes are so high, I mean, we can talk about the issues, talk about pocketbook issues, the economy, all of those things matter, the prescription drugs, college tuition, but the democracy itself is on the ballot. And as long as we have a democracy, we have a framework in which to fight. And so given the high stakes, we're not taking anything for granted.
So how do you get this enthusiasm from inside this arena where certainly everybody is already fired up, outside of the rallies that the vice president and her running mate Tim Walz are having? How do you get that in the streets and make sure that what you're saying, this enthusiasm runs through the tape? How do you get people off the bench here?
You have to center the people. Look, I think most people are so busy working in an economy over the last 40, 50 years where just ordinary working class folks have to work so very hard, where minimum wage or basic working wage is difficult to afford rent in major cities all across the country. And these are systemic issues that transcend any administration. And so folks very often, they're paying attention, but they're busy doing their work. And I think the work that we have to do is to help them to see the relationship between public policy, our legislation, and their ordinary everyday lives. And so what I do is I try to make that plain for folks. I've been in rooms all across Georgia, and when the folks have been asking me, well, what did they do? What did they achieve? And there are a few questions I ask. One of the questions I ask is, have you or anybody you know received student debt relief. And it's interesting, sometimes in the very rooms where folks say, well, what did they get done? A number of hands go up. And either folks had their student debt relieved or someone they know closes the racial wealth gap, literally transforms lives. And I have to remind them who did that. Joe Biden did it. With one hand behind his back, with the Republicans suing him, he still found a way to do it. We've done $160 billion worth of student debt relief. We've capped the cost of prescription drugs, including my bill, which caps the cost of insulin to no more than $35 of out-of-pocket costs. I've got a bipartisan bill right now trying to get that done for everybody, people who have insurance, people who don't have insurance. We're doing, I introduced a bill a few weeks ago on housing, which is along the lines of what Vice President Harris rolled out a few days ago. We've got a real crisis around affordable housing in this country, both home ownership and renting. And part of the problem is we got these old rules, these old regulations in these local municipalities and cities that have really made it difficult to produce enough product. We got to deal with the supply side. So all of these kinds of pocketbook, basic everyday issues, I think we have to make it plain and help people to see the difference between what we're offering and what the other side is offering. So far, what I've heard from the other side is they want to give tax cuts to people who need them the least on the backs of folks who can use support the most.
Okay, let me jump in and ask you about your remarks on Monday. I think the part of your speech that got the most applause and people brought to their feet was when you were talking about this effort of unity and turning the page here, where you talked about all my children need to be okay. And then you said, I need poor children in Israel and poor children in Gaza. I need Israelis and Palestinians to be okay because we're all God's children. Now, obviously, the Israel-Gaza situation is something that is maybe a hurdle for some in the party to get over in order to cast their votes in November for Kamala Harris. Where do you stand, particularly on the sticking point of, U.S. aid to Israel as far as arms? They are calling for an arms embargo. Where do you stand, and how much of a hurdle do you think this is for Harris to overcome?
Well, I meant it when I said that I need all of God's children to be okay. Certainly American children on both sides of the track, Palestinian children, Israeli children, the children of Haiti, the children of Congo, the children of Ukraine. And I meant that. But the work around that is not easy. If it were a simple issue, it would have been solved a long time ago. But we remain focused on this issue. I said months ago that we needed a ceasefire. I continue to call on both sides to find a way to peace and to do that quickly.
On the arms embargo, though? Because that seems to be the biggest sticking point right now.
I have not run into constituents who are asking me about an arms embargo. We're talking about the Middle East. This is a very complicated region in the world. We're not even just talking about Palestinians and Israelis. We're talking about the machinations of Hezbollah and other actors, Iranian proxies in the region. And we have to protect American interests and make sure that there's peace in that region. Israel is our ally, and we don't back up from that one bit. That is our ally in the world, but in that part of the world. But allies are not above critique, and so I have pushed hard early on when we found ourselves in this situation. I've called for the return of the hostages. I think we need a situation that maximizes the chances of them being returned safely. I have continued to press the issues around humanitarian aid and making sure that children get aid. I've been deeply concerned about Palestinian children. There's an acronym in Gaza that basically says child without any living relatives. I can tell you as a pastor, as a parent, that pulls on my heartstrings. To hear the situation that happened on October 6th, rape used as an instrument of war, that pulls on my heartstrings. And I think very often the politics gets in the way and people want you to decide whether you care about hostages or you care about Palestinian children. I'm a pastor. I care about all of those folks, and I want us to find a way to peace.
Well, you mentioned your father. Governor Walz is speaking tonight. They keeps talking about he has this big dad energy. What do you know about him? Have you met him? Have you had any time to chat with him?
I have not had the pleasure of meeting Governor Walz, Coach Walz yet, but I can tell you I like what I see.
What do you like?
Look, first of all, this man is a patriot. He has served 24 years in the military, and shame on J.D. Vance, shame on anybody who would try to attack the military service of somebody who served 24 years defending our country. He is an educator. He's a coach. And here's why I know he can get things in Washington, get things done in Washington. Anybody who's been on lunchroom duty that many years and can have some peace in the cafeteria in a high school can find a way to work through gridlock in Washington.
All right. All right, let me switch gears and talk specifically about the Harris candidacy. One of her first stops was down in your hometown, Atlanta. And to me, it was a big showing about the Divine Nine, right? The Divine Nine were like in the stands for folks who haven't been to
You
an
got to tell these
HBCU.
folks who the Divine Nine
The
is.
Divine Nine. No, we all know what the Divine Nine is, but the Divine Nine is a collection of historically black sororities and fraternities. A lot of them founded at HBCUs, for which I went to and he went to. I went to Howard. We went to Morehouse, so we're struggling with our little rivalry here. But my man here is an alpha. The vice president is an AKA. And at that rally, you spoke, the mayor of Atlanta, Andre Dickens, spoke, who's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, Nikema Williams, who's also an AKA. She's the Georgia Party chair and also a congresswoman. To me, it was a showing of just how deep and how strong the Divine Nine is in politics. Can you just talk to me a little bit about kind of what that moment meant on the stage and what this would mean for this country if this, if this vice president becomes the first, member of the Divine Nine in the White House?
Well, it's a long tradition, and I'm proud to say that my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, founded in 1906, is the oldest, and of these traditionally black fraternities and sororities. Look, there is support across these 9 organizations, and there's a great deal of excitement that Kamala Harris is running. I felt the same thing, by the way, in my own race. Alphas and Omegas, for example, have a kind of real friendly rivalry, but it's a serious rivalry. But I have to tell you that as I've been running in Georgia over the last 3 years, first time I'm not running since I've been in politics, I felt a lot of love and support from members of other fraternities as well as the sororities. And I think you'll see a great deal of organizing. These groups have been doing this kind of work and organizing for years around a host of issues. And this just gives them one more historic chance to make a real difference in the world.
So what is your assessment about how the vice president was able to coalesce the party so quickly? I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about having a broker convention. It was going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight. It's been nothing of that sort. And I think a lot of people are sort of shocked to see that it came together. And look, people were talking about yesterday as being the ultimate flex, right? The ultimate flex of her not even being here, but filling up another arena some 90 miles away. So talk to me about how she was able to do that and what you know about her. Can you share some insights about
She's been doing the work.
that
Kamala Harris has been putting in the work. And on a whole range of issues. Look, she has been working alongside the president as we did things like pass the expanded child tax credit, which, by the way, is the largest single tax cut for middle and working class families in American history. She is a leader on so many fronts. I was with her in Atlanta a couple of months ago when we didn't know she would be the nominee, and we were talking about the fact that we were providing funding for this project in Atlanta that literally was going to restitch or old communities that had been separated back in the 1950s in the name of something called urban renewal. A lot of African American communities were literally split in two. And they just ran the highway straight through it. Communities were broken up. The ecosystems of entrepreneurial businesses split up. And this story can be told dozens of times all across our country. She was in Atlanta touting the work that we were doing through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, to do something about this. So people have been watching her. We've seen the work that she's putting in. And to her credit, she and her team worked very hard to close those ranks. Shortly after the president announced that he was not running and that he was endorsing her, I can tell you that she was on the phone with me within a couple of hours asking for my support. She and I are friends. She didn't take it for granted. She called and asked for my support. I was glad to get it. And wow, she's looking great out there. She's doing a fantastic job, and we're going to do this all the way to November.
Well, let me ask, I mean, like, you made history as becoming the first black senator from Georgia. There are questions about whether or not she should lean even more forcefully into her identity. Other surrogates seem to be doing that on her behalf. She's not really leaning into, identity politics and like maybe talking about her story as forcefully as she could. Do you expect her to do that tomorrow when she takes the stage? Does she need to do that?
Well, look, your biography, your story is about your experience, and your experience informs the work that you do, which is why we do want government that looks like the country. But for everyday folks who are out there trying to figure out their lives, they want to know, what are you going to do for me and for my family? And I'm proud of the fact that she is positioned to make history. But what's much more important is that she's getting ready to make a difference in the lives of ordinary people, so that they can break through whatever barriers that are in front of them. And I think you'll hear her make that case for why she is just a better choice. I mean, she's just a better choice than Donald Trump. I mean, it's not even close. Every now and then, and maybe because I'm a pastor, I have empathy for everybody. Every now and then, for a moment, I feel sorry for the Republicans. I mean, they're literally having to run a criminal against a prosecutor. I mean, that's a pretty bad position to be in. And she has a lot of experience with prosecuting criminals. And in this case, I think she will make the case. The American people are the jury, and I think we're going to get the verdict right.
Okay. So you don't think she needs to lean more forcefully, though? You just think the biography is enough?
I think what she doesn't need is my advice about how to run, and she's doing a great job.
You know a thing or two about winning in Georgia, so maybe she could actually get some advice about how to keep Georgia blue. What is your advice to her on that?
Oh, I mean, look, what I did in Georgia is I talked to everybody, and I would go into little towns in Georgia, sometimes in ruby red parts of the state, or in just some little small area, and folks would be surprised that I was there. This was before I even got elected. They were surprised that somebody running for the Senate had shown up in their little town. I was surprised that they were surprised because I was running to be the senator for all of Georgia, and I meant that, particularly in those small rural towns in Georgia where the hospital had closed because state officials playing political games keep refusing to expand Medicaid in our state. We've had 10 or more hospitals to close in our state. And so when a hospital closes in a rural area like that, it is a real assault on the healthcare system in that region, but also on the economy. Often it's the biggest employer in the area. And so I went to these areas and I talked to folks, and that's what I would encourage her to do. I think that's what you're going to see her do. Lean into our base, lean into the folks who would naturally support her, but also it's important to talk to the people who are in the middle, and it's important to talk to Republicans. I will admit, I like the fact that when I move through Georgia, I often run into Republicans who say, look, I'm a Republican, but I voted for you. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. For me, that's a real honor. I'm listed as the 14th most bipartisan senator in the Senate. And I work with people with whom I disagree 95% of the time, and we can find a couple things to work on. I'll work on them with you, and then I'll go back and fight you on the other issues, because it shouldn't be about the politicians. It shouldn't be about the politics. It should be about making a difference in the lives of ordinary people. And as she makes that case around the issue of prescription drugs, as people are having to choose between buying groceries and buying medicine, as she makes that case around the issue of affordable housing, as she fights to make permanent this tax cut for middle and working class families through the expanded child tax credit that I and others have fought so hard for, I think that's what people will respond to. It's clear that she's talking about the problems of the American people, and Donald Trump is busy talking about his problems. I think we ought to leave him unemployed so he can focus on his problems, and we'll remain focused on the problems of ordinary people.
All right, this will be my final question, and it has to do with Georgia being kind of the center of the new voter laws after you got elected that were passed, these so-called voter suppression laws, right? Do you think that if Democrats keep the majority in the Senate, that Leader Schumer needs to commit to getting rid of the filibuster in order to protect voting rights? I mean, Manchin's going to be gone, Senator's going to be gone, two folks that were some major impediments in moving that along. Where do you think that needs to go as far as how the Senate handles this?
Here's what I believe. Voting rights is not just one issue alongside other issues. It is the framework in which we get to fight for everything else that we care about. It is about the democracy itself. It is the house, the very house we live in. And so I have always said that no Senate rule should be able to block people's ability to be heard in their democracy. And for the record, as we were trying to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Freedom to Vote Act 2 years ago, we actually were not fighting to get rid of the filibuster. We were actually trying to have a real filibuster for a change. I go back and you see the old tapes where the old segregationists tied up the Senate for days and weeks blocking civil rights legislation. And as frustrating and disconcerting as it is even to watch those tapes, at least the old segregationists, at least they had to actually hold the floor. But nowadays, a filibuster is just a procedural thing you declare. I call it a latte filibuster. You don't have to do anything. You can go have a cup of coffee, tie up and block legislation without any effort. Doesn't cost you anything. And so we had put forward a reform proposal on the filibuster that would have exacted a lot of pain from both sides. Perhaps it would have tied up the Senate for weeks, but I thought it was worth it in order to pass voting rights. In the end, we got every Democrat on board except two, and they will not be returning to the Senate. And so I remain hopeful that we'll find a way to pass voting rights.
So do you think Senator Schumer needs to, commit to actually either putting that reform in place or commit to getting rid of the filibuster altogether?
I introduced these bills this year. So even when we didn't have the majority in the House, we have the majority in the Senate. We can't relent. We can't back up on voting rights, not even for a moment. And for me, again, we had put forward a reform that would have not involved getting rid of the filibuster, but it would have actually exacted pain on both sides. And at the end of the day, you get a chance to speak, you get a chance to vote. And the urgency of getting this done, I think, can't be overstated. So I'm open to whatever options we need to consider to get us there. I can tell you that right now, on the ground in Georgia, we're seeing continuing attacks on people's basic rights to vote. We've got a provision in SB 202 that literally allows citizens to just challenge the validity of other citizens and their voter registration. We had 6 activists in Georgia present some 85,000 such challenges to people's ability to vote. You could literally show up and don't know that there's an issue with your registration because some random citizen has challenged it. Why are they able to do this? Because the Supreme Court gutted Section 4 of the Voting Rights Law in 2013 in Holder versus Shelby. So we've got to find a way to restore voting rights in our country. Nothing could be more urgent.
Okay, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for being a great audience. Senator Warnock, thanks so much.